Sports Summit put on by the Center of Sport Management Research and Education. We have a great panel for you today. First, we have Bucky Richardson, who is a former Texas A&M quarterback, so welcome back to College Station. He was drafted by the Houston Oilers in 1992, and he's the current Vice President at Environmental Improvements in Houston, Texas. So Bucky Richardson. We also have Dierker, who is a former Major League Baseball player, pitcher, and manager. He was the manager of the Astros from 1997 to 2001. So welcome, Dierker. We have Tom Farrey, who's an Emmy Award-winning journalist at ESPN and author of the book Game On, The All-American Race to Make Champions of Our Children. Tom Farrey. And we have Mr. Rob Miller, who was a partner at Proactive Coaching and former director of Champions of Character at NAIA. And the panel is moderated by ESPN's Jenn Brown.
Is that working? Yeah? Howdy? I can be loud. I played softball in Florida, and I used to be the voice. So if the microphone doesn't work, I have no problem. How's everybody doing? Good. Was anybody at our event last year on marketing and branding? A couple of you? All right. Well, this is a wonderful event, and it's really great that Dr. Bennett and the entire college puts this great panel together, and we'll have an opportunity for all of y'all to ask questions. Did you hear the Texas come out right there, y'all? I'm from Florida, but I can get that southern twang. So we're really excited. Thanks everybody for coming, and today's panel, as most of you guys should know, is about youth sports, and we've got some great distinguished people that are going to be able to comment from all different aspects of professional sports to coaching, to writing books and journalism, to working with coaches. So thank you for joining us. I guess first what we'll just do is give you guys a little bit of background on the panel that's up here. So I guess we'll just start with Rob first. Rob, why don't you tell us about your education and maybe just the prior to where you are now, past jobs, things like that.
I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and I was a four-sport athlete in high school, and then went on to play NAIA basketball, small college basketball in Michigan, and I went right into coaching from there. I coached a little bit at the high school level. I coached track and field in both boys and girls basketball, and then ended up spending a majority of my time coaching at men's basketball at the college level. And from there, I went to work at the NAIA national office. And the NAIA is the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, about 300 colleges nationwide. And we started a Champions of Character program. And what we wanted it to be was not philosophical, but application-based. What can we put in practice that helps our teams, but yet's character-based as we go through it? And we hired my partner, Bruce Brown, at the time, and then we left in 2008 to start our own business, Proactive Coaching. And since then, we've been working with youth organizations, we've been working with high schools, working with all sorts of college levels, from small college to Division I programs, on building that type of base, so that not only that we're trying to win, okay? We believe winning is important, not so much at the youth level, but at the higher levels. But we want to make sure it's done right under the educational model, teaching kids the right things throughout the process, because most of them aren't going on to play sports professionally, but they're all going to be teammates for life. So that's kind of my background and what got me involved in what we're doing.
Thank you for joining us. Next, a fellow colleague of mine. Why don't you tell us a little bit, how you got to where you are now?
Like Jenn, I grew up in Florida. We both went to the University of Florida. We're just getting you ready for the season opener here. This is Florida visiting campus, I'm just one of these people who was very lucky. When I was 17 years old, I knew what I wanted to do for a living. I was working in the newsroom of the Miami Herald with a lot of really smart, aggressive people who, the way I figured it, they just basically had the best jobs around. They would sort of get curious about something. They'd go out and they'd ask their editor if they could pursue their curiosity for a few days or a few weeks or sometimes even a few months, and go off and meet people they never would meet ordinarily. They go to places they never ordinarily go and come back and tell people what they think or what they've learned, and then a paycheck shows up in the mail, you know? So I said, that's what I want to do for a living, and that's what I have been doing for the last 25, 30 years. I now work for a show called Outside the Lines. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's basically ESPN's news magazine show, Sunday mornings. You know, we look at everything in the world of sports and how it intersects with society, you know, race, gender, sex, politics, technology, on and on. So it's a great place for me to be because, first of all, I work with fantastic people, and then I'm able to explore topics that I'm really super interested in. A topic that I really tried to dive deep on, and it's in part because I'm a parent of 3 kids, 15, 13, 8, boy, girl, boy, is youth sports. I think it is the most important and least investigated topic in all of sports because it's how, if sport is a pyramid, you know, it's how the great base of that pyramid interacts with sports. It's on a personal basis. It's what children do. It's what, you know, it's what we do when we're out, you know, playing high school sports and otherwise. So I think how we socialize children through sports, the lessons they learn, who gets access to sports, who does not get access to sport opportunities, is a really, really super rich area. So that's why I ended up writing a book that was supposed to be about 200 pages, and I turned it in about 400 pages, and they still published it a few years ago. And it really, it capped, you know, I deal with the access issue, the specialization issue, so many of the topics that Greg is interested in, is doing fantastic work in. So it's a real pleasure to be here tonight on such a distinguished panel to share thoughts.
Wonderful. All right, Larry, I would love for you to tell, I mean, you've got a pretty big resume with coaching and playing, of course, so tell us a little bit about your background.
I grew up in Los Angeles, and I played a lot of sports when I was young. In fact, I would encourage youngsters to play a lot of sports. Sometimes there's a crossover effect. In fact, 2 of the greatest sports heroes in Houston history grew up with their main sport being soccer. One of them was Hakeem Olajuwon, and the other one was Jeff Bagwell. So something about the footwork from soccer carried over to baseball and basketball. I don't care if they're skateboarding or doing tricks on their bike. As long as they're doing something and they don't have a parent driving them towards one specific goal, which is to get a scholarship or make their living playing sports, you know, I think it's healthy and normal for kids to experience a lot of different sports and activities. I probably wouldn't be here if we hadn't started something that has grown pretty rapidly. You know, after I actually signed out of high school and got to the major leagues almost right away and played, and then I broadcast for 18 years, and then they asked me to come down and manage the team, which is a distinction. In professional sports, the head coach is called a manager or skipper. Well, after 13 years playing and 18 years of broadcasting, I spent 5 years in the dugout coaching, and we won the division 4 times, and now when I get introduced, I'm usually introduced as coach. I don't say anything, because I know that to most people, the person that's in charge of the playing of the game is the coach. But anyway, that's a distinction in baseball. Once I retired, I started getting interested in several charitable things, and I was approached by a pastor of our church who had an idea for the Cy-Fair School District. He found out that almost half of the kids in that school district were disadvantaged either economically or relationally or in some way their lives were broken. And so he set out on what was a pretty ambitious undertaking to form something called Cy Hope for these kids. it has to do with school lunches, backpacks, taking home food on the weekend, mentoring, after-school tutoring, after-school recreational activities, a broad spectrum of things we're trying to reach these kids with so that they can have a normal childhood. Well, one of our junior pastors was a good enough baseball player that he was drafted out of high school. He went to high school in Florida. His dad was the coach, and so he played 4 years at Georgia State, and then he got drafted again, but way down near the bottom of the draft. So he decided to go to seminary instead. But he never got the baseball out of his blood. So when he found out we were going to build a second campus and we got the land and there was enough room for a baseball field and a soccer field, he envisioned doing something in our area with sports. And so we had a clinic. We got started really late. We were hoping to maybe get enough kids to field 3 teams. We got a great response. Got 13 teams. Had 13 more last fall and have 24 now this spring. And basically our desire, our goal, what we hope to achieve is that through baseball we can teach kids things that will help them in other ways, just like soccer might translate to another sport. What you learn about being a teammate, sportsmanship, responsibility, accountability, integrity, and all of these things that you can learn on a team can help you a lot later in life in areas that aren't even involved in sports. So knowing that very few of these kids, we've got kids 5 to 14, very few of them are ever going to make a living in professional sports. And probably it's unlikely that very many of them will even play college ball. But all of them will get the coaching and the training that we give them. So what we try to do is to be proactive with the coaches and with the parents. And basically we set up a thing on the internet where the coaches are getting blasts periodically with different drills they could run, with some lesson that they may be able to teach. I'll usually write some story of something that happened to me during my career, so that the coaches will be more committed than just show up at 5 o'clock for practice and throw the balls and the bats out on the field and say go ahead. I mean, we require them basically to have a lesson plan, recruit 4 other coaches, have a series of drills to run so that when these little kids get out to the park that they're constantly moving. And what happens too often is that the parents want their kids to have the opportunity, but they don't know how to coach them. And the kids get out there, and even one of my grandsons, his first coach was a guy that played shortstop here at this school. And he didn't know how to run a practice. The first day I got out there, I said, what are these kids standing around for? They'd have 10 kids standing behind each other, rolling them a ground ball. And you need to break that up into, groups of 3 and 4 and have different skills going on at the same time in a rotation, because these little kids, they love to play soccer because they just run, but baseball is hard. It's hard to keep them active, and it's hard for their minds to really work and learn the game and the specific skills required unless they get a lot of reps. So basically we're coaching the coaches, and then the element beyond that is we're sending things out to the parents, and we're sending some of them out from Dierker's Champs, which is the name of this program, and some of them are coming directly to the parents from the coach of their child. And basically what we're telling the parents is that they need to back off. You love your child, you've practiced with them, you want to remind him to get his elbow up when he's hitting or something like that. But if all the parents are yelling out things to their kids from the stands, where does that put the coach? And so our basic premise is that if the parents come to the game and cheer for good plays, whether it's their own son's team or even the other team, and just basically give the feedback to the kid, I love to watch you play out there, I hope you have fun, instead of putting the pressure on them to do better or reminding them of something they forgot to do. So anyway, I kind of backed into this area of sports by agreeing to be the, I don't know, just the name, the figurehead of the Dierker's camp program, and I think we're making a difference. But it's only one school district out of Houston, and it probably needs to spread, not just spread around in Houston, but also in Texas and the whole country, because what I want these kids to do is the same thing that I did. When I look back at Little League, Pony League, Coat League, American Legion, all I have is good memories. All I have is memories of the kids I played with, the fun we had, the practice games we played between games, and stuff we did on the street and down at the high school. Everything is good, except for high school. I got into high school, had a coach who got as far as AAA. He was a little bit bitter about it. He was trying to get us to learn the finer points of baseball that were beyond our skill at that time. And when we didn't, he would go into a rage. He was profane. He didn't do anything to build character, teamwork, or responsibility. It was awful. And then we go into American Legion. We had a dad that didn't know much baseball, and he'd just say, go out and have fun, and we had a great time. So we're trying to set up a program that guarantees that the kids will have a pretty good chance to have fond memories of their youth baseball when they grow up.
That's great. Well, it's interesting, Bucky, because you shared with me a little bit, and it sounds like a similar reason as to why you got involved with youth football and starting your league. But before you talk a little bit about that, give us a little bit of your background. I'm not sure, you guys may know he was a quarterback here at one point. So give us a little bit about your background, and then maybe share with us a little bit how you've gotten involved with youth sports as well.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Yeah, I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Of course, I was like most kids that played football, baseball, basketball, growing up, and loved all three sports growing up. And eventually got to high school and realized I would have an opportunity to keep playing football in college, and just blessed to have the opportunity, and real thankful that Coach Sherrill was here at the time who saw something in me and got me to come over to College Station, and I fell in love with College Station and Texas A&M, and just so glad I decided to come to school here to continue to play football. I grew up about 10 miles from Tiger Stadium. I know, Jenn, you've covered LSU and been there a lot. It's a great place, but there's something special about A&M. And so I'm glad I did, and I tell the story that first, I'd never driven to College Station when I decided to come to school here. And, coming from Baton Rouge, you go I-10 to Beaumont, and then 105, you'd start taking all these back roads and all the cows and farms and things that I saw for the first time. We don't have farms in Baton Rouge, and I wasn't ever really exposed to that. So I thought I'd made a great mistake by coming to school here when I drove here the first time, but I got through my homesickness, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But so played here, and got a chance to play in the NFL, and for a handful of years I tried to fool them as long as I could, and they finally caught up to me and kicked me out in the real world and made me go to work. And I'm a partner in a environmental improvements, and we're a company that's in the municipal water business. We're a manufacturer's rep that sells equipment to cities and municipalities all across Texas and Oklahoma to clean water, clean the city's water and things like that. So I really like what I do now, but in the meantime, I've gotten married, and I've got 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. My oldest daughter's here, and we're trying to nudge her to come to A&M in a couple of years, so hopefully we're gaining on that. But my son, kind of how backed into the youth sports. I know what football has meant to me in my life, not just with the lessons that I've learned on the field, having to be little things that we all carry with us today, how to be on time, having to go to work when you don't really feel like it, doing things that you necessarily don't want to do, and doing things that might not benefit you directly, but might benefit your teammate or your coworker or somebody you have a relationship with. These are the qualities that I learned growing up, and I think had a profound impact on me by, I think I was an unselfish player. I didn't care about, stats and how pretty it was all the time. I just wanted to win. I wanted my team to win. And I feel like some of that's getting lost, but I live in a community southwest side of Houston in the Sugar Land, Missouri City area. Those of you from Houston are, I'm sure, familiar with that area. And there was one league. My son was 7 years old, and it was time. He wanted to play football. Dad, I want to play. I want to play. And so we got to this league, and it was. It didn't take long to figure out it was not what I wanted for my son's first exposure to a game that I just love, and I want my son to have the same love for the game that I do, and so being the only league in town, I had a little bit of a problem. What do I do? And I looked all around Houston, and there's some good leagues in Houston. Houston's a big city, but I didn't want to drive 30 or 45 minutes to take my 7-year-old to practice a couple times a week. So me and a handful of other guys decided we're going to start our own league. And it's the Gridiron Football League, and this will be our third fall coming up. We had about 700 kids in the league last year, just in our second year. And some of the issues, I agree with what everybody has said up here, and the glaring problems, the obvious problems we all know. You see the news clips, 1 or 2 a year, where some coach goes on a rampage on the sidelines with some other coach, and all the while you've got a bunch of 7- and 8-year-olds standing up there watching these adults who are supposed to be teaching and mentoring and showing these kids how to do things. They're going crazy with each other, and I just think that the emphasis has gotten so much about winning at an early age. When the emphasis and the focus is all about winning, it brings out the worst in everybody. And winning is a part of it. We all like to win, or we wouldn't be where we are. And I'm as competitive as anybody, and as the panel is, but it's an age-appropriate thing for me. I'm teaching my 10-year-old son that winning is very important. But right now, it's more important for you to learn the fundamentals, how to run, how to backpedal, how to catch, how to do some things. Winning will take care of itself. And older you get, that will become more important. Right now, it's not the important thing, and we're not going to hang our hat on how many games we win this year. And that's a very, not many coaches, youth coaches and dads think like that. It's all about winning and all the time. And so I'm involved now. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about teaching kids the right way. And to me, when I know I'm doing my job, coaching kids now, is if I've got 100 kids out there and every one of them at the end of the football season say, Coach, I'm going to sign up and play next year. I've done my job. And so that's what we're focusing on.
That's great. It's interesting that you talked about age and the different focuses of what it should be for different age groups in sports. So I'm going to read you guys this statistic and then ask you a question about it. So Ferguson estimates that 40 million children are involved in competitive sports. But children today, they're finding themselves with a lot more options of different sports to play at an earlier age. They say that the AAU boys and girls basketball, baseball, softball, soccer, football, volleyball all can start as young as 9, while Little League baseball and softball can start as early as 5 with T-ball. And Pop Warner, the nation's oldest football organization, starts at 5. As well as soccer, the American Youth Soccer Organization is as young as 4. So with those numbers and the variety of sports that are available, what types of sports should kids be playing at that young of an age to start? Is there any sports that you would feel are better than some? I'll start with you because you've done specific research in this area. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's interesting. We don't come at sports in this country from a scientific perspective. We don't do research and then figure out methodically how you would build an athlete. But they have done that in the Eastern Bloc countries and the Soviet Union and places like that, which of course they started getting into the doping issues back then. But they also did a lot of very good research on thinking, okay, how do we progressively build an athlete over a long-term period? And you can look at some of the research, and it's very helpful, I think. There's a model called long-term athletic development, which is really speaks to the progressive stages that an athlete needs to move through to become as good as he or she can be. And it's not about winning at age 6 or so. It's not about specializing in baseball at age 7 or 8. It really says that, between the ages of 0 and 5, you simply want kids to be active. They need to be moving. You need to be building basic, fundamental movement skills, right? It could be chasing a ball in the backyard. It could be chasing a dog in the backyard. It doesn't really matter. It's not about, picking a given sport at a really early age. You want to build those basic movement skills so then you can transfer into any number of different sports later on once you decide what's for you. And between the ages of 6 and 10 or so, the emphasis really needs to be on fun and fundamentals. Make them fall in love with the game and give them the kind of fundamentals that Bucky was talking about, backpedaling and so forth. Then there's, sort of these, learning to train stages and training to train stages. And then you really only get to the, the focus of winning once a kid is well into his teenage years. And if you sort of take that model and just have kids move at an early age, have them play multiple sports, emphasize fun and fundamentals, you'll end up with a very good athlete. So I don't think it's ever really too early to introduce kids to movement or sports. It's just you're not looking for them to win championships and specialize at a very early age. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let me ask you, you work a lot with a lot of players, coaches. I know we talked about the high level, but in your opinion, what is the age that you found that really, the stuff that you do, which is working on the mental side of the game, the leadership, and then also skill set, but what age do you find that is the best time to start working in those types of areas with kids?
I think there's a couple ways to look at that too as you look at it. One is from the physical aspect. When you look at the laws of motor development, for those of you out here that have taken physiology, it comes to a point, the laws of motor development tell you that kids don't really start learning the skill level until about age 6 or 7. Okay, to actually learn fundamental skills, it's 6 or 7. And yet we have them playing at 4 and 5. And how much do they understand not just the physical skills, but you go to some places and they're starting to throw in complicated offenses and defenses. And I was telling some of the panelists earlier, I went into a practice to coach my daughter's 12-year-old team, and at the other end there was a 5-year-old team, basketball, trying to run what's called the flex offense. I know colleges that can't run the flex offense, okay? And this dad couldn't figure out why kids were running into each other and falling down. It's pretty simple. It was too complex. So I think you start building that, you look at it and you start developing. I agree with Tom. I'm not sure it's ever too early to introduce and see what their passions are. You can see what their passions are by what movies they like to watch. Things like that. Start showing the passion. But it's that aspect of, okay, well, let's look at this fundament from a physical standpoint, probably age 6 or 7. And then start throwing in the life lessons at that same point, the point of reason, 6 or 7. Then start adding leadership later. I agree exactly with the progression you were looking at. But I think here's what's happened. For most of you out here, you're under 40 years old. If we're sitting in here. And there's been a huge change in our culture. For me, example, I'm 48 years old. I started playing baseball first. I think I was 8 or 9. Then I started playing basketball when I was 10 and football when I was 12. Well, if you look at the process, we kind of refer to it in a little different way than Tom did. The first part of sport is the joy stage. And the joy stage is when you just go out to have fun. Let's go in the driveway, let's go do this, let's go do that, let's have fun. And there's great life lessons learned there. The second stage then is the fundamental stage, which starts at 6 or 7. You start learning the aspects of the game. And then the third stage is the competitive stage. Competitive stage is, ooh, winning and losing is important, and I got to compete against this guy for my playing time. That's important, okay? That all gets introduced. Well, when I was growing up, that was about, joy stage was about till age 8 or 9. And then the technical fundamental stage was about to age 14. And the competitive stage was about 14 to 18. And then the last level is the mastery stage, college athlete. Go on to the Olympics, pros. What have we done in the last 20 years? We've taken that whole thing and shoved it down. You have till about age 2.5 to have to be in the joy stage. And then everything starts hitting on it. And somehow we have to pull that joy string through there. And one of the examples I use is, you know what great lesson most of us learned that started playing in the playground? We went off to the playground to play until age 8 because we weren't organized. We learned a great lesson. It was called conflict resolution. Because if we didn't, somebody got beat up or the ball went home. Now we plan everything for our kids at age 4. And they're not learning some of those things. So I think it's introducing and then add it in when they're physically ready, 6 or 7. Then start adding in the life lessons. But keep that fun part of it the whole way through. I think that's the key.
Well, let me ask you this then. If we're seeing it starting at 2.5 years old, do we see it getting better? Do we see that? Is competition going to be any less, or is it going to be more extreme moving forward? And I guess what would be a suggestion to?
I don't think it's going to get better unless we intervene. But that's why we're sitting here, because when you all disperse from college and go to wherever you're going to make your career, you're going to remember something about one evening you were sitting in an auditorium in College Station and somebody said this is mostly about the kids having fun. And then maybe you get together with some of the other dads and things do change for the better. And for me, for our grouping of 4 to 14, I don't think there's any way we're going to be able to tell at age 14 whether any of our baseball players are going to be good enough to even play in college. We might be able to predict a few of them for high school, but I've seen it through my career and others' careers, the way they've transpired. You don't just get older, get taller, get heavier, and get better, because your skills kind of come and go. You go through an awkward stage. You might have a problem with your joints if you're throwing like my son did, and it's a growth plate thing. So, you kind of have to observe if you are the coach or the parent. And I think, all of these things for the little kids, just riding a bike, kicking a ball, just anything where they're active. And when you see these guys with their kids in select leagues, I mean, we're not telling parents not to get private lessons for their kids, but we're encouraging them to work with their own kids at home or at a playground by just throwing wiffle balls, and to not, drive 15 or 20 minutes across town and get with somebody that used to play professional baseball and grind for an hour in a batting cage. And I feel like if you do that, kids too early, some of the ones that have great ability are going to get burned out, and they're just not going to be interested at the time in their life when they should be.
That's interesting. You mentioned burnout. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because I think that's an interesting factor. Okay, let me ask you, when did you played 3 sports, you said, when did you start sports, and then how did that affect you with your children?
It was 7 or 8, but everybody up here has said the word fun. And, when you become a parent, the thing I want for my children is to enjoy what they do. And, my son plays baseball and football and doing some of these things now. My daughter plays volleyball. But when you start asking an 8, 9, 10-year-old do you want to play baseball? Of course he says, yeah, Dad, I'd love to play. But he didn't know he was signing up for every night of the week. Okay, I mean, it's the pitching coach one night, it's the batting instructor the next night, it's team practice the next night. They get burned out so quick and don't want anything to do with it. As they get older, they're going to look at you and say, Dad, I don't want to even see a baseball. And that's the risk you run with trying to force feed kids that don't really understand. So we focus in our house on getting the work done, working hard. But my 10-year-old loves baseball and football, but he's not going to do it every night of the week. I want him to be a 10-year-old kid. I want him to get on his bike and play with his friends and do the things that we all did growing up. So it's a fine line, you know, and the more I'm around parents and we've all got to intervene. That's why we started the Gridiron, and we're all doing the things we're doing to try to make it better. But you'll find that all these parents, I mean, their son is the next Jeff Bagwell and Willie Mays and Marcus Allen, and you know, and you can't tell a dad any different when his kid's 10 years old. I mean, he believes it to his core, and so you just try to lead by example and work on the things that are important. And you know, some dads come around, some don't, and the kid ends up suffering because of it. So,
but you don't have to teach kids to want to win. If they want to win when they're 2 or 3 years old, they won't let the other kid play with their toy and all that. I mean, we're born to compete, and so we don't have to put pressure on them to make sure they understand that it's good to win. They know that. So we need to teach them fundamentals when they're ready. But so many things, being on time, you know, that's the first thing.
That's a big deal.
Being on time, because we can't practice unless we have all our players. And if somebody's 15 minutes late, it makes the experience less valuable for the other 14 kids that are there on time. So that, and then, you know, if you're gonna go out and be a cutoff man, a relay man, or turn a double play, it won't help if you catch the ball and you're ready to make the play if your teammate's not there. So everybody has responsibility, so you learn what you're supposed to do in order to be a good teammate. And then I think with a little bit of encouragement, you can even get them to respect the other team. And if you can get to that point, you're doing pretty good.
Well, Larry, you mentioned earlier, you used the word burnout, and as Bucky was mentioning, you know, kids nowadays, when you sign up for a sport, it's every day. It's practice every day, games on the weekends, summer ball, travel ball, and now kids are traveling further distances to work with professional coaches. You know, there's a lot of time involved in that, coupled with going to school for 7, 8 hours a day. You know, the thought out there is that the kids aren't really having now time to be kids. And so with the word burnout that you use, what are some of the negative, you know, effects of kids, you know, playing sports so early on and in this competitive nature? What would you think?
I think there's burnout, there are overuse injuries. Larry referred to those. I mean, it's a big issue in baseball. I mean, I would not want my kid to play in Williamsport for the Little League World Series, because kids who, those pitchers on the mound there almost never make it to the major leagues. In part because they're often early bloomers. They've got hair on their chins, and you know, but everybody sees them as you know, major league stars, and you've got a travel team that also wants them to play, and they end up pitching way too much and throwing balls they probably shouldn't be throwing. And it's actually a recipe for actually going nowhere. I think you kind of want to be a late bloomer in baseball if you're going to have a chance. I mean, there's overuse injuries, there's burnout, but there's also a larger societal issue here too, with so many parents focusing their kids on these sports at such an early age and paying so much money for trainers and for out-of-state tournaments and travel this and select that. Well, there are a whole lot of Americans who can't afford this, okay? There are a lot of kids in really poor communities who can't play at the youth sports arms race, and so they get left out. And so guess what? Now we have one of the biggest obesity crises in the world. And guess what? Half of the cost for every, you know, person who becomes obese and has all these health issues are picked up by the public. So you and I end up paying for for the kids who are being left behind, and never end up developing the love of sports and the fitness habits that will carry them through a lifetime. I play soccer now. I still play some tennis, some basketball, and my healthcare costs are really low. Okay, really, really low. You know, I'm lucky. I mean, I grew up in that era in Florida where I played. I wasn't like Jenn. Jenn played. I can't get over. She played 7 sports in high school. Can you imagine? She set the record in high school. I didn't play, but I played a lot of sports recreationally as a kid. But they're mostly casual. I mean, the whole travel ball thing really didn't start until 8th grade, maybe, and we really didn't travel much. So I had a lot of time to sort of fall in love with these games, and it was accessible, it was cost-friendly. My parents divorced, a single mom, didn't make much money, but I still had access to sports. And a lot of kids today do not, simply because they can't afford it.
And the other thing too about the societal implications, and this is hit fairly close to home too. If you're the star athlete, you know, then you get admiration, respect, and you feel good about yourself. Your self-esteem is good because everybody thinks you're special and all you're doing is something that you enjoy. If you're not very good in sports and you're not going to get that, then maybe you could be a really good student and you can have that to be proud of. That your GPA, you're on a path to do something outstanding. But what about if you're neither? You know, all of us want to be somebody. We want to have something important about our lives or stand out. But there's a lot of bad ways to stand out. And that could be a societal effect, is kids that rebel against authority, that rebel against achievement. They go the other direction. And sometimes it's not easy to recover them after that.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting when you talk about kids that can't afford to play, but there's also something that just a personal level that I noticed where my dad, I have a half brother and 2 sisters that are 13, 12, and 11, and they're fully into video games and TV, and you know, I grew up in a house where you got home from school, rode our bike to school, you get home, you do your homework, and then I went out in the neighborhood and I played, and I didn't come home until dinner. And it's crazy now to see the kids whose parents, maybe they're single parent homes, or maybe you know, the parents are older or just not as involved. And unfortunately, I see this happening with my little brother and sisters, is that they don't know how to play. I told them one day, I said, you guys, I want to talk to Dad, go outside and play. And they just looked at me. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, go outside, like go play tag, go burn ants with a magnifying glass, like whatever you do when you're 11 years old. And they just looked at me. They went outside for 5 minutes and came back in and said, can we play on the computer? Can we, you know, play on our Game Boy? And I was like, absolutely not. When I'm here visiting, we're going to go play sports. But you know, there's other challenges that you know, outside of not being able to pay for that I see. That's just, you know, it's unfortunate. And you know, you've got the highly competitive side of things, and you've got the economic side of things, and you've got the I call it the technology side of things that's getting in the way of sports. And something I want to kind of go on to another topic. In the past 2 decades now, the focus has really been, there's been a trend in focusing on one sports specialization. You know, we see now in the media, we obviously cover it a lot with ESPN, but you see these success stories. And Tiger Woods, for example, people who, you know, they focused on one sport, they started it, and that's all they do year round. And so I'm just curious kind of what your guys' thoughts are on sports specialization. Bucky, you said you played 3 sports. I played a couple as well, and so I didn't focus on just one. I'm very thankful that I had that opportunity. You know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of I'm assuming this is more parent-driven than kid-driven, to have a parent say, well, this is going to be your sport. And to me, that's just a crazy statement. You know, we've talked about if there was somebody that could determine what 10-year-old was going to be a great football player, a great baseball player, a great golfer, he'd be making billions of dollars and he would be working for every professional team there is. I think you gotta, again, you just gotta let kids be kids, and you know, what's become a novel idea now is let the child do and participate in the sports he wants to. I mean, sometimes you have to step back and just let your child be a part of something that he wants to be a part of, and quit trying to, you know, live your life through your children. And I see a lot of parents doing that. So you got to be careful. But you know, whatever my children want to do, I try to support that. And I don't want them, as they get older, to rebel or to feel like somehow I pushed them doing things that they didn't really want to do. And as a parent, you have to guide and lead and show them, but you got to kind of let them make some of those decisions on their own too, and we're there to protect. And so, you know, another thing that I think is so important too about, you know, we don't know who's going to be what when they're 10, by the time they're 18. So inclusion is very important, and we touched on that a little bit earlier. The league that we're running, Gridiron Football League in Fort Bend County, we don't turn anybody away. And if it's a money issue, we'll figure it out. If it's an equipment issue, we'll figure it out. If it's getting you to and from practice, we'll figure it out. But we make the league accessible to everybody that wants to play. And that's another important thing. And being on a lot of teams growing up, some of the most important teammates I had never played in the game. But man, did I learn a lot from their attitude and their hard work and their, I mean, they were leading and had no idea the impact they were making. They weren't helping us on Saturday, but they were helping the morale during the week. They were always the first one to practice and the last one to leave. So, you know, not everybody's going to be the quarterback or the running back or the guy scoring a touchdown. But when you play a team game, it's a team game, and everybody has their role. And some of the most important roles there are kids that will never play, even in high school, much less college or professional. But man, they're great teammates and they're great friends and they're inspirational. And so that's a big part of it too.
You know, Rob, that obviously makes me think about what you and I were talking about at lunch and what you lecture and when you work with coaches. Talk about that a little bit. We may have several people in the audience who wants to be a coach and aspires to do that. And I think some of the statistics and what you teach, I think, is very fascinating, especially comparing the leaders on the team versus the star players in that respect.
I think it's huge because I think it plays out how your kids are going to go on, how your team's going to perform when you get to the older stages, the high school and the college level. And when you look at it, you kind of look at this, kind of adding specialization in that. I know one thing as a college coach, I was looking for athletes who were very good in basketball, but I wanted them on other, it didn't even have to be a sports team. I wanted them on another team. I didn't care if that was the band, I didn't care what that was. Because if I'm recruiting them to play basketball, chances are they were the star. Okay, but they might come to my team and not be the star. And I want to know, how did they fulfill that role when they were on that other team, whatever team it was, and they were sitting on the bench? Were they a great teammate, or are they only a good teammate when they're the star? And those are the kids you got to watch out for, which leads me to what I was talking about you. One question I ask high school and college coaches all the time is, you know, who are your 3 most talented athletes? Okay, they write them down. Okay, then who are your 3 best character athletes? Who gives you the best decisions on effort and behavior every day? Okay. Most of the time, those aren't the same 3. And your team's never going to reach potential until they're the same 3. And that's why as coaches, not only do we have to be good at X and O's, we got to be good at teaching life lessons. We got to be good at teaching character, because it allows them to be better teammates for life, and it allows our team to produce at a higher level. And when we get those things, then we really are in the aspect of what sport's about. Because, you know, I think we've all talked about it. Very few are getting to that next level. And Tom hit on it when he talked about overuse injuries. That's one of the big things in specialization. The studies have shown that kids that are specialized have more injuries. That's what we're starting to see out there. And I think we've got to tackle that issue. And I'll be honest, I think another thing as a coach I want to look at is, have we a well-rounded person coming into our program? You know, let's develop them well-rounded. And I think sometimes we get caught in this world of, I'm going to start specializing at age 8, and that person out there tells me they can be my college recruiter and get me a college scholarship, and I can play on this select team and I can do this. And it's a money game is all that it is. That's what it boils down to. It's a money game. People, there's not that many more scholarships out there than there were 20 years ago, okay? But all of a sudden there's 100 more recruiters at every doorstep trying to say, we can get you that. And so as a coach, we really have to focus in on both the fundamentals of sport, the life lessons of sport, and developing well-rounded people that go with it. And sometimes specialization doesn't allow that to happen.
One quick quote, and I'm gonna have to add, how do you say Fred's last name? Is it?
Eng.
Thank you. I should know that. All right. So in Fred Enge's book, Why Johnny Hates Sports, he talks about that if kids are competitive at early ages, that they may not be trained in how to fail. And that philosophy is very interesting to me. And the thought process, from what I gather, is that if the kids are only focused on winning and they're only praised when they do well, they start not taking chances. They start not taking that shot. They don't want the ball, and then all of a sudden you're creating a reverse psychology in sport and not wanting to succeed, but they're so scared, and it can really, the humiliation of not wanting to fail can affect kids. So, and they're seeing more and more is the one sport specialization. So, Tom, what are your thoughts about that aspect of
the U.S. soccer is confronted with this because we have more kids in soccer uniforms than any nation in the world, by far. We've been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, and pretty concerted in a way, but we have yet to produce one truly world-class player. Think about that. That's amazing. A nation of 300 million people, more kids in uniforms, not one world-class player. And U.S. soccer has come to understand, in recent years, they've rewritten their best practices book to reflect this. The problem is we're not developing creative, inventive players who know how to play with the ball at their feet and are going to try to. And the only way you get to have that magic, to be that Leo Messi or that Ronaldinho, is to try stuff and fail and fail and fail and fail and not be punished for it. And part of the problem today in youth sports is kids, there's no real room for kids to fail. I mean, my son played soccer, and his goal, he played left fullback. He didn't play too many other positions. He played left fullback because that was the best thing for the team. And his job was to collect it and move the ball to the outside and boot it up the wing. And he completely mastered that at an early age. But you don't dribble in front of the goal because, oh my gosh, someone might steal the ball and put it in the back of the net. And you don't dribble too much because someone might steal the ball as well. But this is how you develop good soccer players. You try things, you dribble the ball, you have fun. And when you fail, you don't have parents yelling at you, you don't have coaches punishing you, and you don't have teammates who've been told that winning is the only thing that counts, and therefore there's a price. So it's amazing. There's all this energy going into youth sports in this country, but we're not developing the kind of creative. Look at baseball, right? I mean, the Dominicans, they're the ones with flair. It's not us with flair. They're the ones who, and it's out there. They're on their, they're working with their Buscones, or they're just out on the streets having fun. And at some point they get into these camps and they develop the 5 tools, and they end up at 16 as very attractive prospects. But because everything is so organized here, and because it's so focused on winning, and we think we're developing better players, we're actually not. On a per capita basis, we're really not developing that many creative players. I think that's the cause.
It makes me think, and I guess we can move on to kind of parents in that respect, because parents play such a pivotal role in creating who these children are going to become and putting those pressures on children. Let me ask you, as parents, that's such an important role, and I went to a youth football game they were in 3rd grade, so what is that, 8 years old, and I saw a parent. I've never been to a youth football game that young, and I saw there's a parent there that was up on the fence yelling at the coaches, yelling at the kids, and the whole time did not stop, and I was blown away because I was like, they're barely not running into each other. He's like, defense, just like I don't even think they know how to, just like, anyway. So with that said, parents are so important, and how can we as a community, what's the ideal role for parents in youth sports?
Well, I'm going to give an example of good teamwork right now, and I'm not going to answer that question because I heard a very eloquent answer to that exact question on my way back from a speech in Waco to the Texas High School Baseball Coaches Association. On the way back, one of the coaches played a tape of a speech by Bruce Brown, and you worked with Bruce Brown. The thing I remember more than anything is release them to the team. Can you remember how to say that better than what I can?
We talk about parents need to learn, and it is the 99.9% of parents that want their kids to have a good experience, not those 0.001 want to beat up coaches and officials. That's not what we're talking about. But for those 99.9, we talk about release them to the game, and what that means is let all their failures be theirs and let all their successes be theirs. Where else can kids learn that today? You think about our culture, where else can they learn that? I have a 16-year-old daughter. I'm not going to totally release her to school. I'm not going to totally release her to movies. I'm not going to release her to weekends, and I'm never releasing her to boys. But I can release her to sports. Those can be hers. And when she fails, guess what? You failed. Let's learn from it and move on. But it's yours. When she has a problem with a coach, and here's one of the big things, and you guys all know this from your kid, how many parents want to go in and solve the problem instead of teaching their kids how to deal with an authority figure? What a great opportunity it is for our young people to walk in and talk to an authority figure and say, ooh, because they're going to deal with it the rest of their life. They're going to have to walk in and talk to the boss, they're going to have to walk in and talk to a professor, and they're going to have to walk in and deal with it. And we've got to release them to that. And let all their, and when it's their success, hey, pat them on the back and say, nice job. In fact, we give some red flags in there that they haven't released them to the game. And some of the things we talk about is, you usually hear this from dads, this is a key you haven't released from the game when the dad says, we did a great job today. We struck out 14 today. We scored the winning goal. They had nothing to do with it. And they got, those are some red flags. Red flags are when parents are more nervous before the game than their son or daughter is. Here's a key one. A red flag is when it takes the parent longer to recover from the loss than it does the son or daughter. And we go through a bunch of those things, and all that comes from kids. Everything that Larry asked me to talk about, that's information from kids. Mom and dad, and here's what they end up thinking now. Think about how sad this is. Here's what kids said in the survey that Bruce did, and we should call it a presentation of it. Many kids feel this: Mom and Dad love me more when we win. Mom and Dad love me more when I play good. They base their value on athletic performance, and that's sad. And we need to release them and say, go for it. And if you fail, comes to what Tom was saying, fail, but at least go out playing fearlessly, not fearfully.
You try to lead by example, for sure. But I see it every day. I see dads particularly treating kids based on how they play. If they played well, we're going to eat, and, high fives, and when the team loses or the kid doesn't play very well, get in the car, we're going home, you don't deserve this and that, and you just, it's hard to interject in that kind of moment with a father and a son. We talk about, I find the best opportunity to kind of address a lot of this stuff is before the season starts. Because you can write down all the list of problems that we have and address each of them. That way nobody has done anything bad yet, but we've talked about it, and this is how we're going to handle it, and this is what we're going to do. So the expectation level is set, what we're going to put up with from a parent and what we're not going to put up with. And at the end of the day, you don't want your kid to remember when he gets older. You don't want to be the dad that all the kid remembers is the car ride home kind of deal. Where the kid played as hard as he could, he might have struck out 3 times and made an error, and it's not because he tried to do that. That's baseball. Baseball is a game of failure, period. And that's why I love my kids playing baseball, is because you have to figure out how to handle failure quickly and often. And it's a great teaching tool, teaching them how to do that. But it's hard, but I think what we do is try to address a lot of these hot topic issues with moms and dads and what to do and what not to do. right before the season and talk real direct about it and blunt about it. And hopefully some of those moms and dads will hear you and make a difference out of it.
We're in sport, 7 out of 10 times you fail and you're still considered good, right, Larry? I like that. I was like, I can strike out 7 times and I'm still really good. It's awesome. Larry, just your thoughts in terms of just the role. We talked about parents a little bit, playing sports, being a coach, maybe all the things that you've done with youth sports. What roles should adults play with children? What's the most important role, I guess?
I think the most important thing that you can do is to give them the opportunity to know. I mean, they're not gonna know if there's a league starting up for this sport or that sport, or if if it's dance lessons or whatever it is, to present opportunities and not push the kids in the direction that you want them to go, but to lay it out for them so they can do what they want to do. They're going to find out where their skills lie if they try a lot of different things. And so to me, as a parent, the important thing is to give them the menu and to see where they go with it. And after that, I don't think there's really anything as important as being available to practice with them if they want to. And basically supporting them and encouraging them and not criticizing them. Let the coach do that. I think it's mostly let them go the way they want to go. Be there for them to help them practice if they want to. But my son was left-handed thrower, so all of his coaches thought that he was going to be a left-handed pitcher because I was a pitcher. So then he got typecast as a left-handed pitcher and he never got to hit again. And he was actually a pretty good hitter, but since he was a pitcher, they had to DH for him. And so he got right into this specialization thing, and he was so uncomfortable on the mound because guys were going, and he was self-conscious. You could tell that he didn't like being out there. So in between games, I had built a mound for him. I had a net with a strike zone with a bucket of balls where I could stand next to him and coach him. I got the catching gear so I could go back there and catch him. But I would say at least 80% of the time, when I asked him if he wanted to go out and throw a little bit, he said no. We're going to go play some pickup basketball. I'd say, great. When I got to go to the ball with these kids, I'd say, well, okay. Be here when you get back. Just let me know when you want to. But I felt like it would be a disservice to him for me to try to force him to do what I did, or force him to do anything, really. I'm only going to make one exception to that. You need to start playing golf. Because about 3 or 4 years ago, my son, who's 27 now, said, Dad, how come we didn't play golf more when I was growing up? I really like golf. And I said, well, Ryan, you didn't like golf that well then, because I took you out. I don't know how well you remember, but if you hit 2 or 3 grounders in a row, you threw down your club and went like that, and you wanted to go home. It's a hard sport for a little kid, but it's a sport we can play up to the very end of our life. It's with my grandson. I'm probably not going to make that mistake. There's a place nearby where we can hit balls, and I'm going to try to force that a little bit more, not because I want him to be a pro golfer, but because I want him to learn when he's young, so it's natural, so he can enjoy it when he gets to be old and has bad knees and hips like I do. And all the sports, you keep getting eliminated as you get older because you can't play them anymore, and you just keep playing golf. So in that one exception,
golf.
you start playing golf.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'll come. I'll have to. I'm terrible for one. I putt pretty well actually. I'm a pretty good putt putter, but that's about it. So I'm gonna need to work on that. Rob, I'm interested because you guys have done so much study and research. At what we hear where you can take that hands off approach and you just let kids be kids. I grew up, my parents were Olympic gymnastics coaches, and gymnastics is an interesting sport because you peak, the highest level that you get to is at a very young age. You know, they've now raised the Olympic age for gymnasts, but you know, it used to be that you were at the top of your game when you're 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. To hear of an 18, 19-year-old gymnast was crazy back in the day. And so at that level, gymnasts, I saw, I mean, kids would leave their homes and they'd start at such a young age, and that was definitely from parents being very actively and pushing a child into doing that sport. And that might be a little more unique, but I'm just curious, in the studies that you've done and the people you've come across, all four of you, you know, of these highly successful athletes that we look at and that we hold in a high regard, you know, what roles, if we know, did their parents play in that? You know, obviously we've all heard about Tiger Woods and his father and what he did with him, and I just don't see, keeps on coming back to my mind. But you know, what are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of, you know, what is there a point where you're too hands off and you're not maybe helping them, where you play 7 sports, maybe like me?
Well, I think there's a couple of areas. One is this: I do believe one thing you can do as a parent that necessarily isn't hands off, but it's once that young person, that your son or daughter commits to a team, then you're not necessarily teaching them skills or going up, but you're making sure they follow through on that commitment. Okay, practice starts at 6, go move back down the time. We're going to be there. I have to commit to have them there at 5:55 if I'm the driver. You know, I got to commit to get them there. I got to be part of that commitment process as the parent. Okay, if I got to have them there on time. I got to say, if they're, you know, 3 weeks into the season, my belief is 3 weeks, I don't like the sport, I'm not going to play. No, good life lesson right now. You're going to finish the season. And so I think there is that comes along that you can do it. I think one of the keys for parents to understand is to understand their kids emotionally. Because there's a big difference. You know, think about this. I mean, when you're a little kid, having fun is being silly. It's kind of going out there and just having a blast and just, you know, it's like I say, I believe what you said, Larry. I think every kid is competitive, and I'm not into not keeping scores. Because I think every kid knows what the score is of the games. But the thing is, as soon as it's over, they're ready to move on if they're having fun as being silly. Okay, we lost, let's go. What do we do next? But then there becomes a point, I think it's different for every young person, where having fun is being good. Okay, now I want to be good at this. Now, how can I support that? Not necessarily like some of the overbearing things we're talking, but okay, now maybe they're ready to go see that coach. Now maybe they're ready to take that next step, and I can provide them that menu of opportunities that we discussed up here. So I think there is a way that can help them along the way without being over-involved. But it's a supportive one. And the last thing I would say was this. They have to learn the coach is going to critique them. I think anybody here who's played athletics understands this. If you can't take criticism as an athlete, you're not going to last long. Coaches are going to critique you. And I think we all understand this. You know, if you're not being talked to, they probably don't think you're going to get much better. But what can I do as the parent to be the encourager and maybe the listening board? Don't take the game to them, but if they want to bring it to you, be willing to listen. And listen, not necessarily talk back with everything, but just be a sounding board. So those are some of the things I think as a parent that can help kids to help them reach their potential.
What do you think?
I mean, I'll introduce sort of a different idea. I think parents, in addition to being supportive of their kids, can also be advocates within your own communities for quality sports programs, right? So I think, you know, we can sit here and moan about the state of things, but you know what? At the end of the day, we still control the process. I mean, parents sit on all these soccer boards. They're the ones who are on the Little League boards. They're the ones who, they're just like you and I. But the folks who are running those boards are typically the very ramped up, you know, not in Bucky's case, but often the very ramped up parent who's, you know, very motivated to turn their kid into a scholarship candidate or otherwise. So I think parents, if you want a more moderate approach, more reasonable approach, run for some of these boards. Get in there, have your voice heard. This is a democracy. You still have a chance. You just need to be part of the process. And if you're not going to be part of that board, or even if you are, ask certain basic questions. What kind of training do the coaches have? I mean, do they even have basic CPR training? Something happens to your kid, and this person's in charge of them. Do they have the ability to take care of them? Do they have, you know, some kind of training in how to communicate with kids who are 8 years old versus 12 years old versus 18? I mean, do they know about the praise sandwich? you know, how to deliver criticism in an effective way so you don't turn a kid off. Are they trained in the sport? Do they know what an 8-year-old can handle on a basketball court versus a 12-year-old? You know, virtually every country in the world places a higher priority on coach training than this country does. Pretty much, it's amazing. Teachers are trained. We insist on standards. They know that you can't teach calculus to a 3rd grader. But in this country, if you want to start a sports team, you do. And no one's going to ask that you're certified or what kind of training you have. And now you're going to spend a whole lot of time around these kids, and you're going to have a major influence on their life, positive or negative. So parents can say to the soccer board, the baseball board, the football board, what kind of training do your coaches have? How do I know this is a quality person that you're putting my kid with? So they can just be much better advocates, and they can understand these age-appropriate windows too. They can do a little bit of research themselves and learn about long-term athletic development and how you need to emphasize fun and fundamentals between this age and otherwise. And I think if parents understand that stuff, as well as the odds, really, I mean, how long the odds are of a college scholarship, and how often there isn't even much of a payoff at the end, because you might get $3,000 from the baseball, you know, from the baseball coach. If they really understand the investment that's going to go into what they, you know, how there's not that much of a payoff at the back end, I think it will adjust the decision-making process for parents as they move their kid through the process. So they just need to be better consumers.
So those are kind of the ways to deal with parents. I'm curious with both of you. We talked about the specialization. We talked about burnout. What are some ways of dealing with that to make sure that the burnout doesn't happen? You know, having been in baseball for so long and you know, football, what would be your thoughts on that?
You know, I think there's a few ways. One is be proactive. I mean, whenever you're involved in youth sports, you're doing community service. I mean, it's not something you do for money to get paid. You do it to make a difference, and you do it to make it better than when you got it. So that's very important to understand. And another thing, to what Tom was saying, put your kid with a coach that thinks like you think. And there's all kind of different varieties of teams doing all kind of different things. You know, baseball, if you want your kid to play 100 games when he's 10, well, there's lots of coaches that their team's going to go play 100 games. If you're like me, I'd like my kid to play 30 or 40 games. That's kind of what I think is right, and I'm going to make sure we're with a team that's kind of within that same mindset. But you can get whatever you want, but you have to be proactive. You have to ask the questions and put your children where they would be best served.
Another thing that we did with our kids, and I would encourage any kid to do this now, my grandson or anybody else, is just make up a game. If they're trying to zero you in with a pitching coach because you can throw harder than the other kids when you're 10 years old, that doesn't mean you're going to be on the high school team. But it does mean that you might be able to throw strikes if you go down to the park with 4 kids and make up a game. I think where they have fun, a lot of times, is when there aren't any parents around at all. And I think, you know, some of the video and some of the way that our society is organized now probably works against kids getting together in small groups from the neighborhood and going down to the park or the local high school or just anywhere out in the street and being creative and inventing something where you can use some athletic skills, but they're not necessarily the specific things that you're working with a professional coach on.
It's a case in point, my little brother and sisters. Exactly. It's really scary when a kid looks at you and you say go out and play, and they're like, what do you mean? What do we do? I'm like, occasionally when we go out and play, they would drag me back home. You know, we're playing capture the flag, and so you know it's definitely a scary thing. I guess. You know, we've talked on so many subjects now, and I know we want to open it up for questions, but I guess finally, just to conclude this part of it, I'd love to hear, you know, we've talked about when you started, but I'd love to just hear something, end on a positive note, hear about some of, you know, your guys' experiences with organizations and things out that are making a difference and are doing a good job in youth sports, and why that's working, and how it can continue to get better, just so that you guys can experience, you know, get knowledge from all of their experience out there. So,
I just think we're seeing more of this type of thing happening across the country. I think we're seeing more people awareness going on. We're seeing a lot more youth organizations that are starting to say, if you could, and it's a fine balance because you're going out there trying to get all these teams to play, and you're looking for volunteer coaches, community service. But you're finding more that say, but we're going to need to hold you to a standard. You got to go through 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours, or a day-long training to come in before you do it. I think that's key. I think that has to happen because Tom nailed it. We do least amount of training of anybody in the world. I mean, you just go across the border to the north of Canada, and everything's structured out for how their youth coaches are. But we're dealing with a lot more kids too, so we need a lot more people doing it. But we're having more and more organizations step forward to do that, and that's starting to seep into the high school level. So I think you're starting to see that, and because I mean, you see this happening at a lot of the high school associations now. They're forming dead weeks in the summer. You can't do anything in the summer. There's these 10 days off. That's the time to go with your family. And we're starting to find some more of that happening. And I think there's this realization that we've overused, and it's not just affecting us in athletics. It's affecting us culturally. It's affecting our families. It's affecting everything. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but let's just do it so we all kind of come together and do it the right way. I think we're seeing more of it. I really do.
I'll be honest with you, I heard one of the most hopeful things today that I've heard in a long time. I'm actually working on a story right now for ESPN on Title IX. It's the 40th anniversary of Title IX. I'm looking at the topic of what about low-income girls? Where are they? You know, 43% of African American girls in this country don't get 1 hour of exercise a week. Okay? The Surgeon General suggests 1 hour a day. The rates for Hispanic girls are incredibly low. Kids and it's not just really a racial thing. I think it's largely an economic thing because from these homes that don't have money, they don't have access to, to the travel teams and so forth. I'm not just saying this because I'm here at Texas A&M today, but I think one of the most promising things I've heard is what Dr. Bennett is doing, which is research involving these kids that he's bringing together he's got this baseball academy, but with the soccer team is what's interesting to me. He's got these girls from middle class and upper middle class homes. Half the girls are on the team, and the other half are from underprivileged environments. They just can't afford these teams. So he's smashed them together. And these are 10, 11-year-olds who had never played soccer previously, but he put them together on a team. He got a good coach. He put them with Rachel, who played soccer here at Texas A&M, and she is teaching them the game. First touch, lots and lots of touch, technique. Here's how the thing is done. Super high quality coaching. And these girls, last year, they had no clue what they were doing. Got blown out in the first few games. By the end of the season, they were competitive. They started this season, and they're winning most of their games. And they're playing in a very high-level league in Houston against all these other club teams from parents who are writing a $2,000 check and have been doing it for years. To me, that is incredibly hopeful because you're tackling two phenomena there. One, the specialization impulse, right? That you have to specialize early to find success, by the middle school ages. And number two, giving kids access to sports. And what I really like about this experiment is he's going to measure it. He tried to assemble a team that was representative of the community, not the upper middle class community, not the poor community. He's got kids from all over the Bryan, or I'm not sure if Bryan's part of it, the College Station community. And again, surrounding with good coaching, and they're finding success. And he's going to measure it. And this is what we need, because we can sit up here and say, oh, specialization is bad, and we could tell all kinds of anecdotal stories about this stuff, but until the research comes down the pipe and shows that it is, you don't have to specialize early, and there are ways to kind of get kids who don't have access to a certain game into the game. Once those models form, I think communities and parents will respond to it. I can't see why this model that Dr. Bennett is putting together here couldn't be replicated in just about any university community in the country, right? Where that has a sport management program or a kinesiology program where you tell the graduate students who are former athletes, look, you're going to go into the community, you're going to help run these teams, we're going to smash them together, and we're going to create good examples. And parents will respond to that. Americans respond to, they want success. And if they know that is a successful model, I think the culture can change. But in the meantime, it's you know, it's going to be tough. I mean, on the side, I'm an ESPN reporter, but I'm also helping the Aspen Institute, which is this not-for-profit educational policy studies group out of Washington, D.C. I'm the director of this Sports and Society program, and youth sports is the first topic that we're looking at, and we're sort of assembling leaders from across the country and citizen athletes who care about this topic to create this collective conversation and pull to the fore best practices and models that have worked out there, so other folks can, that they're aware of it, and they have the tools to then deploy them in their own community. So, I mean, I'll be very interested to see what Doc Bennett is able to come up with in this community, because I think it could, it really could be scalable.
Larry, what about you? You shared with us right at the beginning just the systems and coaching philosophies that you kind of put in place to help coaches, but you know, what other things have you seen that are working? And
well, what we're doing with the coaches is basically right now we send things. We use email, we use the internet to create a website, and they have access to it. It has a list of drills. It has you know, the way it's organized in practice. Each time we send something out, it has a message along with it, either about teamwork, sportsmanship, accountability, responsibility, integrity, and I usually try to supplement that with something that happened during my career that would be an example. It doesn't necessarily always have to do with me. It may be something I saw somebody do in a game, but basically to give the coaches the tools to enable the kids to keep moving and have fun. The biggest problem in baseball is that it's a rather slow game, and it requires kids to be able to catch a ball, throw a ball accurately, and hit a ball. And most of them aren't really good enough to do that when they first start getting in leagues. So maybe the parents feel like they need to start them that early, but I don't really think you do in baseball, because their skills are just not adequate. But as a coach, if you have drills that help them understand how to get in position to do things and use their hands, and how to move, you know, the rules of the game, you know, when it's a tag, when it's a force. And a lot of these dads, they just volunteer to coach because they want to help their kids, and they haven't ever, you know, they have maybe played a little bit when they were little kids, but they don't have a concept of how to get it organized. So we try to get it organized to help them keep the kids moving, to help them to just understand the basics of how to teach the sport, and try to get through the first, maybe from the time they're in T-ball at 5 up until they're 8 or 9, through the coach pitch, to where by that time the kids understand the game. And I think after that, you can get a little more advanced and challenge them a little bit more. But it is, as we've all said, it's all age appropriate. I never coached a team at all until I managed in the major leagues. I didn't even coach my son's team. I coached basketball because it was the off season, but I never coached baseball. And so after I finished managing and I had the summer off, I coached the high school team's summer league. And at that point, we got all these kids around, and I said, okay, do you guys want to really learn how to play baseball, or do you just want to have fun? And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you really want to learn how to play baseball, it's not going to be equal opportunity for everyone. The best hitter's going to hit third. The guys that's fast with a good arm are going to play center. The guy that's the slowest is going to hit eighth or whatever else. The extra guys that aren't as good aren't going to play. You're going to have signs, we're going to have pickoffs, we're going to have bunt plays, we're going to have all the things that they're doing in some of the other high schools that you didn't learn at your high school, with the added element that some of you guys might not get to play as much as you'd like to. Do you want to buy into trying to be the best baseball team we can be and see how many games we can win in that way? Or do you all just want to play evenly and share the at-bats and the innings pitched around and just have a good time this summer? And they wanted to win. And the ones that weren't quite as good will still support that. And a lot of times we won, and it was possible to give those guys a lot of meaningful innings and reps on the mound or at the plate, because the nature of the game was we had the game in hand. So that was more of a grown-up experience. And I'd watched some of the high school games, and I knew they weren't getting that from their high school coach, so they wanted it. But it was age appropriate. They were 16, 17 years old, and they'd been playing all their life, and they were good enough to play in high school. And they were going to have to learn all those things if they went to college anyway. So I think you just have to, in whatever sport it is, to understand what the kids are capable of. And the research that these guys do, I'm sure it's readily available along with other things that you can find on the internet. And I think as a coach, you just need to know the rules of the game, the drills that you can use to hone your skills, and have the heart of somebody that's there for the kids, and not somebody that's there that's going to get your pleasure out of holding up the championship trophy. So I say, like you said, this is a start. You know, get to a point where you have good information. The only reason we want to win is because we want to have the best coaches, because we want our coaches to be trained. And so we want, well, you know, there's no sense shooting for a mediocre goal if you can raise the bar a little bit and have a pretty good chance of clearing it. And so my attitude is I'm a little bit different from our pastor, because he's more about character development, and I'm not willing to completely let go of winning. And so my feeling is that if our coaches can coach better than the other coaches, and our parents work with the kids at home and do the drills as we encourage them to do, and we give them the material, that as a byproduct of good coaching and good parenting, we will win, even if that's not what we emphasize when we come to practice or when we come to have a game. I think it will naturally occur, and then, you know, as they get a little older, whether they go on or whether they don't go on in any particular sport, and later they grow up, they're a better fan of that sport because they know the sport better.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I'd probably like to end just, you know, kind of addressing the students in the room. You know, youth sports, I mean, we're learning so much from all the research, and people are becoming more knowledgeable about the do's and don'ts and how to do it and what to do and how much and how little and these things. But at the end of the day, I mean, most folks in this room are going to go and have a family and have children, and we're these kids' first contact with athletics, whether it's soccer, baseball, football, tennis, whatever they're doing. And you know, and I know, and we know that you're never going to be good at anything that you don't invest the time in, read up on, get some knowledge about what you're doing, and be good at it. Take pride in it, just like you do your schoolwork, just like you do all the other things you're going to do in your life. This is one of those important things too. And you know, are these kids, you have to ask yourself, you know, would I want to be coached by me? Or would I want to be mentored by me if I'm this kid? And I've spent a lot of time in reading a lot of what these guys are putting out there, and you know, I played football, but playing football or baseball, or whatever other sport, doesn't mean you can be a mentor and teacher to a child. You know, you've got to take pride in what you do, be good at it, make a difference, in not only your child's life, but your community too. And have some pride in your work, and things will always work out. So.
I guess with that, we'll open it up. Any of you guys in the audience have any? Oh, Dr. Bennett?
You guys, don't be afraid to ask questions. I know most of you are. I'm scared right now. Do what Bucky said, right? If you don't mind, tell them your first name and where you're from. So we can put that in context.
Any questions?
There better be several. I know you do.
I just have a question. I guess it's geared toward
Where are you from?
I'm Ryan. I'm a master's student in sport management. I guess it's kind of geared toward Rob, and what because you deal with more of the youth sport aspect. But one of the things I've encountered is this notion of leadership. Kind of hit at it, but you never really talked about it. When do you start encouraging leadership skills within your team or your organization? And how do you think you foster that but also teaching them how to be good leaders and the rest of the team being good followers, how that molds both societal and
I think you start right at the point of reason, 7, 8 years old when they're first starting, and you work with everybody on leadership. Okay, I think you start working because you're going to have people. If you wait till they're sophomores in high school, okay, they might have already had their track, or they lost out a little bit, or they're behind, or you're going to have somebody that's turned into a leader. It's just not the leader you want; it's the bad one. I think you start early with all traits, and you start building them, and then over the course of time, and this kind of comes back to that progress as a coach. If I'm coaching at the upper level, I want to work with everybody below me and have a good progression so that each kid's moving along over the course of time. And then we can start looking at what way do they go. I think we're seeing a lot more of this at the upper levels in high school, getting away from captains and starting to go with leadership teams, leadership councils. So it's not just 1 or 2 people. And what were those anyways? But create leadership job descriptions. And when they're 8 years old, leadership job description might be pretty easy. You know, it might be one thing. And then by the time you're advanced, it's this big. I don't think it's any times too early once the point of reason to start teaching. They might not know you're teaching them leadership, but you're starting to teach them leadership early.
Yeah, I think from a practical standpoint, the way we kind of implement beginning to teach what it is to be a leader are simple things, football related, helping your teammate up after he gets knocked down. Or you see a teammate crying on the sideline, go ask him what's wrong and how can you help him? How can you make him feel better? When you're doing drills in practice and one kid jumps off sides, the whole team runs or the whole offense runs. So they figure out real quick, I'm not only accountable for my action, but it's also important for me to know that the guy next to me is doing it the right way and doing the right thing. I think at the youth level, the word leadership, that kind of blows them out a little bit. But you, practically speaking, you can teach it, and they figure it out pretty quick. And all of a sudden, you're on the line running sprints after practice, and somebody jumps off sides. They're holding each other accountable, and that's really what leadership is accountability.
And you see, if I could just add into that what he's saying, that's great right there, add it practically, because here's what happens. How many times does this happen on teams? People become leaders and they think that means that entitles them to tell everybody else what to do. And you can start edging that out early. It's about helping your teammates, serving your teammates, not telling them what to do all the time.
More questions? Come on. All right.
Tom, I don't have a question. I'm going to ask you to ask questions. These are 2 of the parents of the 12 girls right here.
Hey.
Tracy and Sissy's mama. And maybe you want to ask them a question. Who knows?
Sure.
I hate that they weren't here earlier. So.
Well, I got to get my tape recorder and start interviewing, That's a great story. I was talking to Dr. Bennett today about it. It's just really fascinating. I love to learn about this team here. Why don't you tell us from your perspective, where were your daughters before this team was formed, and how has it changed their approach and affection for sports, or maybe even this particular sport, soccer, and what type of impact has that had on them as young girls growing into confident physical beings? or otherwise. And I know I just gave you 3 questions, and at ESPN, we get interview training. John Sawatsky is always telling us, don't ask no double barrel question. I give you a triple barrel question. I'm gonna let you tease that out.
I guess I'll try and just answer it all in general. Before, my daughter was basically just a one sport kind of person. Basketball being the dominant sport. And by being exposed to something that we had never engaged in, soccer, she has become more competitive, more confident. She enjoys playing different sports because she realizes now that it helps her in all of the sports. They complement each other. She has also developed a camaraderie and friendship with students and other girls that she wouldn't otherwise have relationships with, and that has also exposed her to another side of life. So, I think that I know that it's been a good thing for her, not only athletically, but also when she interacts at a different level. It also impacts her education because it's challenging, and so she is able to actually embrace things that are more difficult for her and not give up as easily. She understands how to work. So
that's great. Did she have to work through? The sport was brand new, right?
I'm sorry?
The sport was brand new to her, right?
Yes.
So was there were there confidence issues? Was it like, oh, I can't do this?
It was because we didn't understand it. We see soccer, but it was just not something that we would normally do. And there's also a component of running. We think that, oh my gosh, I'm running all the time. So it's built up her experience. I also had another daughter that was involved in the program, and she played with the other girls, and her confidence level was just skyrocketing.
That's great. What's your daughter's name?
Patricia.
Patricia, yeah.
Not Patricia, Monisha.
Monisha.
She goes by Tracy.
Yeah, Tracy and Precious.
Tracy, and who's your daughter?
My daughter's Felicia, Sissy.
She just started.
She just started this year.
She just started, okay.
She's played with the different soccer leagues, and she really, really loves soccer. Since we've been with the 12, she just blossomed. She used to, play on a different level, so with this level, with the competition, she just learned so many more techniques. She loves the program, and I had just saw the change in her like overnight. She's always wanted to go to practice. And just eager. She's eager to be there, to be on time. Getting mom make her late. But I just see her attitude. She's a good student in school already, but I have seen just the attitude just jump just to be able to go out because she knows that her grades come first. And so she's doing better in school. And I think overall, she's just liking the idea that she gets to play now other sports. With this program, we have different sports that she gets to play that she hadn't engaged into.
Yeah.
So she's excited about the program. She's ready for baseball. This is going to be her first season of baseball. She's loving it. She got out and she doing practicing on her own, just to keep herself up. But she's really enjoying the program, and I just really thank Mr. Bennett for allowing us an opportunity to participate.
Yeah, that's another feature of the program I didn't mention, is he insists that they not specialize, so they play different sports during the season, which is interesting, which is really interesting, because the kids, I can talk to you, Mr.
That's all right. She didn't misspeak either. They play baseball against boys. It's an all-girls team, and they compete against the boys, and they win. So lucky it'll be good we win, too.
Well, I can talk to you guys for another 45 minutes, and I probably will, but I don't want to dominate this. So
Need some questions from the audience, you got it.
Sure. I'm Kylie. I'm a grad student in sport management. I'm from Post, Texas. My question is for Tom. I know in your book you talk about one of our local athletes, Michael Reese, who just signed here actually.
Yeah, great kid.
Yeah, and it's funny because my interest is in the media, and I like hearing about all the stories with, you hear about these kids being recruited to play football in junior high, all these crazy stories, kids keep getting younger and younger. So how do you think the media's role in youth sport is going to evolve over these next few years?
I would hope, okay, here's the deal. You know, yes, there's the Little League World Series is on TV, and it ain't going away. Okay, why? Because it gets a good rating. And if ESPN doesn't televise it, then Fox will, or the new CBS Sports will, or the new NBC Sports will. Or, you know, we live in a 500 channel universe. There's a website called Youth Sports Live, which has webcams. You know, at Little League fields where parents can pay, I don't know, $15 to watch their kid. You know, they're in some distant city. Look, media is here. It's saturating social media. Otherwise, we can't say media just shouldn't cover anything. It's just going to happen, especially if there's a revenue model there. However, I think there's a role for good citizenship. There's a way to appropriately engage with the youth sports crowd. So if you're going to go down there, you're going to turn kids into content. Be a gentle giant. Go down there and help parents. Be a resource for parents. You know, help them learn about what's age appropriate. What kind of questions to ask at their local soccer board or their Little League board. How to make it a good experience. It doesn't have to be lecturing or parental. You know, like we know the right way and we're going to tell you how to do it. It's just a matter of providing resources and creating a dialogue around, supporting dialogues like this around the topic, so people can come together and help make quality collective decisions and quality individual decisions for their kids and their communities. So there's absolutely a role, and if they don't do that, then I think there's going to be a price to pay. People are going to be angry at the media for just turning kids into content. So it doesn't have to turn in that direction.
And that's another thing where if you come back to the parents, because it did on me one time. I had a pre-game interview segment that I did that was attached to this day in baseball history. And on this given day in June or whatever the Little League World Series was, a team from California won the championship, and the star of that team was the son of a major league player that I knew. And so what I'd try to do, I'd write the game story and who the pitcher was, who got the big hit, and all the facts, and then I would call and record something over the phone. So I called him up and asked him if he could get his son on the phone. I'd like to ask him about the game and and get his reaction. And he said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." I said, "What?" He said, "He's 12 years old. I don't want him having cameras in front of him. I didn't even like the College World Series because of that. He should just be a kid playing baseball and having fun." So in that instance, I said, "Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, well, I can do the story without his interview, but I appreciate your opinion." But that was an instance where the parents said, "No, I don't think it's right for him to be a media star when he's 12 years old."
Can I add on that with the media too? I think one thing too with the National Signing Day and all that's become, and I think one thing that can really help also with the media is to understand that there's only a small percentage that go on to play at the college level, and most of those aren't at Division I. Most of those are Division II, NAIA, Division III, junior college, and sometimes those people get lost. And yet, what we're finding in some of those cases is, though it's getting earlier and earlier to recruit the Division I athlete, it's getting later and later to recruit everybody else because they're all waiting for the Division I offer that never comes. And so in education, not necessarily at the ESPN level, but even locally, if we can educate parents to say, here is the recruiting process. Here's what it is, going down, telling the story, doing that research, I think could really help benefit people to understand that most of the time it isn't the full ride. Most of the time we're getting, like I used to say when I was recruiting kids and giving them a $3,000 scholarship. If you want to pay $10,000, you can come play for me. Because that's what it was, and that's what it is for most athletes. And I think that we really need to educate better in the whole recruiting process across the board.
That is not a question. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Jamie. I'm actually one of Dr. Bennett's PhD students. And my question was going to be, what role do you think the NCAA plays? I used to coach college softball, and it dealt a lot with the early recruiting and stuff. And I was going to say, what role do you see the NCAA playing in youth sports and how it's kind of shaping the specialization versus diversification and stuff?
I think there has to be, it comes back to the training of coaches, I think, that comes through, or youth organizations getting involved. I think the NCAA and the NAIA started, they're not there yet, has done a pretty good job of providing pretty good information to high schools about the recruiting process, and also needs to get down, you know, the NCAA especially has done a really good job with summer programs and things like that. But it's the question of where does it go once that information gets dumped on that youth organization in high school? And a lot of times it gets lost. And it needs to go, you know, it might get sent to the guidance counselor. Well, if the guidance counselor doesn't send it to the coaches, who sends it to the parents, no one knows. And so I think there's a disconnect there, and I'm not sure how to solve it, but I think there's information there. I mean, the NCAA website alone can give you the whole, it gives you all the statistics, it gives you the whole process, it gives you everything that's there. And one of the things that I think will be coming, and I'm not sure it's going to be regulated by NCAA or NAIA, but one of the things you're going to start seeing is a really thorough look at the recruiting services that all these kids are paying $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 that aren't doing anything more than mom and dad could do in about a week's time by getting on the internet and doing studies. And those are going to be the ones that fall under scrutiny. But there's some good ones out there. But a lot of them are just paid to the money, and I'm going to, you know, I'd sit at the coach's office and get a stack that big of kids that had no match to my institution. And so all these people paid money, and my thing was I'd throw them inside the trash can. And that, I think, is the problem. That's the big area of education I think we can all work on, is the recruiting process.
I have one follow-up. I think the NCAA, I mean, if we're really honest about it, this whole specialization push, a lot of the craziness we've seen in youth sports over the past 10 or 15 years is because parents are chasing the athletic scholarship. Okay, so the NCAA, wholly without intention, has completely reshaped the youth sports environment, because you now have parents chasing scholarships at age when their kids are 6, literally. So I think the NCAA has the same decision that you know, any other large organization that's making money in this space or is engaged in this space already is, are we going to be part of the problem, or are we going to be part of the solution? And so I think the NCAA can ask itself, okay, well, how can we be of, you know, how can we help this environment? What more can we do? I wonder if they could do more in the area of research. We talked about the need for universities to develop research that can truly be helpful for parents and communities and sports organizations. There's a real lack of it out there. I mean, the CDC, a lot of the government research, they don't fund sports because it's seen as entertainment and frivolous, and there needs to be more research. And I think they can, universities can also be, you know, these programs like what Dr. Bennett is doing here. I mean, you've got all these athletes, you've got all these sport management schools, these kinesiology schools. There's no reason they can't begin to help educate, you know, their local community and then their state community on what good practices are with youth sports and otherwise. I mean, they have the attention of all coaches in the state and parents because their kids want their to come here. So there's a real opportunity for the NCAA to be a real positive in this environment, but they probably need to engage a little more than they are right now. It's just one of the sense of things.
In the back.
I am from Mexico, and in Mexico sports are based on a national meet which is called National Olympiad, which is from ages from 11 to 18 or 11 to 19 probably. And we don't have this kind of high school sports integration, or we don't have universities with sports. I mean, 2 universities in Mexico has it, but an athlete cannot like aspire to go to a university and continue its athletic career because they have to choose between being an athlete or being a student. Like, usually people that want to continue their careers and studies, they have to come to the US. So every state has to push these athletes to go to the National Olympiad, which is a huge meet or competition in Mexico of all sports. Like, it integrates like 25 sports, even some non-Olympic sports. And these states have a lot of money to push these kids from a very early age. Like, my state has 100 million pesos, which is like $10 million, to push like just that age kids, but they don't push them to love the sport. They don't push them to know what sportsmanship is. They push them to know how many medals in that meet you're going to win. And this is the focus of the whole country, because CONADE, which is the main sports committee, I can say, this is its focus too. So every state has to focus in this meet. So when these athletes come to the age of 17 or 18, they are like completely tired of this sport and they don't want to know anything because they have been doing this for like 10 years. So in Mexico, you can see that the athletes that come to the Olympics are around the age of 20, 21, and then you won't see anyone. I am a swimmer, and 4 years ago, there were 4 athletes in the Olympics in Beijing, and there were 2 19s, 120, and 126, which study in the US, which was the only one. So if you were the director of sports in Mexico, like, I know you will change everything, but what will be your focus to start to do something about it?
How's your Spanish?
I couldn't hear any of that.
Well, I think one thing is look at the different models. I mean, and I think we're starting to see that in these states. You're seeing there's 2 different models. Just kind of mind. You have the club model or the national governing model, which you're under, and you have the educational model, which we followed in the states, which is kind of uncommon. The high schools and all that, that's not common across the world. And it's been built on, our programs for the most part have been built on the educational model. And then over the last 20 years, we've kind of got that same model you're going through filtering into us, and the 2 are at odds. And we've seen that, and you mentioned USA Soccer earlier. Well, they just came out in the last, it was about three months ago or less, and said, okay, if you're training for a U.S. national team, you can no longer participate in high school athletics. Just made that statement here, if you're on any of the training teams across. So we're starting to see that same push going on. And I think one thing is to balance that out by looking at the educational model of athletics and how it falls into the bigger picture. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about. And how can we incorporate the educational model within the club model and hopefully make it a broader approach than that single-minded winning is everything approach, which I think we see a lot at the club level.
Well, our educational model is really like in schools. When you go to do your hour of sports that every school has, you play soccer. That's what you do. Like we're not taught to know even the basics of volleyball or tennis or swimming. Like if there's an athlete that succeeds, it's because of meritocracy. Like it's because their parents help them, because there are a lot of kids of low income that doesn't have the opportunity to meet sport in Mexico, and the ones that have are pushed to go to the National Olympiad and win. So we don't have that, like the government doesn't have anything that pushes them to develop better athletes or athletes that like their sport.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, it's hard to, I don't know the Mexican system well enough to really give you an educated opinion how to fix it. It's a headache enough to get our minds around what's going on here and figure out solutions. And so, I mean, I think the only thing I can say is I would encourage every community, every state, every nation to come up with a policy for sport. I mean, what's the purpose of it? What exactly, you start from someplace. What exactly is the purpose of sport? And then begin to, create sub-policies. In this case, in this country, it's Title IX, or it's the Amateur Sports Act, or otherwise, that would support the overall goal. If your goal is to create elite athletes, then you're going to come up with a certain set of policies. If your goal is to have sport for all, then you might have a different set of policies. If you want to kind of have a hybrid of the two, then you're going to have a different set of policies. So it's hard to critique Mexico, but I would start with a fundamental question of why do we have sport? What do we want it to be?
Well, we want to thank everybody for coming, Rob. Bucky and the entire, I'm kind of stepping on Dr. Bennett's, but thank you guys for coming. And you know, it's obviously a fascinating topic and one I think we could all sit here for hours. But I know we can eat dinner too at some point. But you know, it's great to see, you know, the turnout from the student level, and I think you've gotten some great ideas. And just, you know, take what you've learned here today, and you know, like everyone said here, is you have that opportunity to be the change. You at the parent level, at the coach level, at the, you know, getting on the boards of your local youth programs or pushing them to be held to a higher level, you know, to just interacting with your own children and encouraging them to be who they are and that. So I mean, we're excited that, you know, everybody came and hopefully I know I took a lot away from it, so I'm happy to have been here. But thank you to the panelists and Dr. Bennett, obviously, for putting this whole thing together, because it's pretty special to have a teacher like him that can do things like this.
I don't think I got on tape. Here's what's going to happen. Maria's going to give out some stuff here, but the panel is willing to stay for a little bit afterwards. Y'all don't bull rush Bucky, okay? Or Jenn, for sure, don't be doing. But the issue is, hopefully you guys learned that you know, this is something I'm hopeful that it's going to impact your lives, honestly. Most of you aren't even thinking about children right now, but eventually when you have them, it's going to make a huge difference in your life. And if you learn one thing tonight, that's going to be helpful. So and again, they'll stay around for 15, 20 minutes if you want to talk to them. I would also advise some of you, if you're smart, your sport management student especially, these guys that are here all have something to do with sports, and they're all very influential in their communities and the world, really. So it would be very wise of you to talk to them about what your future may hold, because they have jobs. That's kind of an important thing. Or can actually steer you towards jobs, which I think is very important. So if you want to talk to them, by all means do that afterwards. But now we're going to give away some things.
Okay. On behalf of the Center for Sport Management, Research, and Education, we have a few tokens of our appreciation for you for just taking the time out of your busy schedules to come talk to us about youth sport and raising further awareness to the important issue in the sport industry.
Thank you.
We're going to pause for a second because we want them to put it on. Y'all want to mention that in a second. You got to put that on, Ron. You got to put it on. You got to put it on. By the way, something I didn't tell you, it's Jimmy's getting married next week.
That's my number.
Don't hurt y'all's feelings. That's one of our wedding presents. Yeah, I know.
I got this.
Might be tight.
A little tight. Not going to tackle. I know you said you did.
It's real tight. It's okay. Might not be able to get it off.
Oh, you look like a player, man. You know, Dierker is not weird. What was Bucky's number? He wanted to
7.
Okay. All right, I'll get in there. They were all had a crooked number, which is a slow one. All right, y'all ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Sorry. All right. So y'all thank them again if you don't mind.